when someone doesn't take initiative is that it leaves me as the chief decision-making officer, and the more decisions that you make in a day, the fewer decisions that you're able to make well.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of days that I'll procrastinate a decision because there are too many decisions, or I don't have the right answer and don't have the white space to make that right answer. So when people just take the ball and run with it, it eliminates the need for extra bottlenecking decisions to be made.
Welcome to the Disruptance Podcast. Here are your hosts, Eric Forney and Michael Bounds.
Mike, every week on the show, we aim to disrupt the way real estate agents and entrepreneurs think about their business and their life. And this week, we've had a lot of people who have engaged in the conversation that we had on last week's show about the difference between working in a corporate environment and an entrepreneurial business structure. And those two things can often be massively different. And so kind of along that same theme, we've been piggybacking on the book, the Team Success Handbook, which really is a guide to working with entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to go through what I'm calling now the 12 commandments of working in an entrepreneur company. And I want to get your take on what your perception is of those 12 commandments and how it's imperative that people show up in your organization and why these commandments are so critical in that style of environment. So Tyler, or Kate, or both, would you like to popcorn? No, I'm kidding. What's one of the first commandments of the entrepreneur company?
So the first success strategy is create value. Always work to provide leadership, direction, relationship, confidence, and creativity capability.
Okay, so create value. And what I hear is like from the perspective of if you work for the organization, how does someone who works for the organization create value for the company? We know obviously you create it for the customer, but how does someone create value for a company?
So have you ever hired? I know you have. So there's two types of people that you hire, right? I've hired a lot. You got to get good at it. But like you hire two types of people, and there's two people, the two types, there's one type that normally adds energy, and there's other types that take energy away. So you want to aspire to be the person that adds energy. And so when I say add energy, it's like, it's weird. Like I'll hire somebody and then I notice they just start sucking from me, or then I hire somebody and then they come around me and they energize me.
So what would be an example of a way that someone adds energy to when you work with them?
So they add value. So so for me, me being an entrepreneur, when I came in as the team leader CEO of Indy Metro West, I was like, you're paying me a salary, so I need to do enough work in order to cover that salary.
Yeah, that's right.
You add value, and then you're compensated for that value. And if you have that subtle shift in your mindset, that is in a corporate, you're rewarded for the hours,
that's right,
and the time in your task. So then you can have that mindset, but in an entrepreneurial mindset, you have to flip it.
So what I think that's really important, because when you think about adding value, there's a massive mindset difference between the person who believes they get paid for the job and then the person who believes they get paid for the value they contribute to the organization.
Right.
Very, very different. When you contribute a massive amount of value to an organization, you systematically make yourself irreplaceable over time, which means you drive your own value up as a result.
Right. You can't leave.
That's right. And so the company does anything and everything they can for that person to stay. And ideally, they're driving the value of the company up simultaneously.
What I like about this is specifically in the book, they talk about having your batteries included or not. So when you hire somebody, are they coming with batteries or not? So are they just interviewing well, or and then they show up for work, but there's no batteries. And so it's kind of like what you were saying, Michael. Are they just sucking energy, and then you have to basically drain from your battery to get them to do what they need to do, versus do they know what their unique talents and capabilities are to actually bring actual value.
You know, I coach agents a lot, and for whatever reason, it makes me think of actually what we're looking at right now, which, you know, for our YouTube listeners and viewers, sitting in front of a lake, and it's a nice beautiful summer day, and there's people out on boats, right? And early in the morning, people ski and surf and wakeboard because the water is smoother in the morning time. And you know what I find too is that in the late summer, the boat gets like algae and barnacles and all this sediment built up on the bottom of it. And when you get that sediment build up and you get a couple skiers behind the boat, all of a sudden when you hammer on the accelerator, the boat doesn't drive very fast.
Drag coefficient.
That's right. And the driver is pulling those skiers and the barnacles and everything else that's weighing them down behind the boat.
Yep.
And that's what it feels like as an entrepreneur when you have people in your radius of influence that aren't creating value for the company, is you're pulling them behind the boat always.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've all been there.
And that's not sustainable. You can't, you got, I mean, I think there's times in your business where you have to do that, but the job is to make it to where there's not, by partnering with people that add value, you've always got a shiny hole, and you're always out in the morning.
And if you're somebody who's looking for an opportunity, this is the thing that I think is interesting. If you're someone who's looking for opportunity, you add the value.
Yeah.
Knowing that everyone works for someone, regardless of where you are in an organization, even the CEO works for someone. Mm-hmm. They still have to contribute value to the organization in order to maintain an effective use of their job.
And to wrap up this success, do you guys have anything else you want to add about adding value? Otherwise, I was going to provide some action steps from the book.
Yeah, I like it. Let's do it.
Yeah, so there's four action steps that the book talks about that I really like. Always be looking for how you can produce faster, easier, cheaper, and bigger results. Pay attention to those activities that give you energy versus those that don't. Find new ways to be a leader, to provide confidence to others, and to be creative with your capabilities. And finally, bring your own energy and provide your own batteries.
Yeah, that one point about be a leader.
You just
oh, good, okay.
I think we both bloop. Man, like even if you're the director of first impressions, you are a leader.
That's right.
Everybody's a leader.
Yeah.
And when you don't perceive yourself in that light, you are not adding value.
Yeah. And even if you don't have a title, you do have the ability to lead. It's whether you choose to or not. That, I think, is one of the biggest misnomers, that people don't understand the difference between an entrepreneurial company and a corporate company is title or no title, you're a leader by your influence on others. The fastest way to influence others, oftentimes without a title, is by taking action and generating outcomes that other people take notice of. Because people will follow you if you have no title at all, if you create massive value. Martin Luther King's a pretty damn good example of that. Yeah. No title, hell of a big movement.
Yeah. Well, and that's the opposite. That's the opposite of what what corporate, like they reward you for the titles, they reward you for like the task, where in an entrepreneurial, it's flipped. You go in, you lead, you get results, you are you're untouchable.
Yeah.
So the second strategy is take initiative. Look for ways to be proactive, solve problems, make improvements, and propose ideas.
In an entrepreneur's world, your title always is CPO. You are the chief problem officer, because there are no shortage of problems to solve in business. Will you walk past the trash when you walk in the door every day, or will you bend over and pick it up? Will you wait for the janitor, or will you actually clean up the messes? And that to me is the biggest difference is, will you wait on someone else to do it because it's not my job, or do you just get shit done?
When you're an entrepreneur, there like I remember when me and you were talking about like CEO, and we were talking, and I think you said something. I didn't give you an excuse or something like that, and I think it kind of surprised you. I was like, the buck stops with me. Like, who do I complain to? But like, everybody is a CEO.
Yeah.
And so that if you like, I work no different now than I did before I had the title. I think you just kind of work up to the title.
Yeah, that's right. It's because when you're taking initiative, you're actually taking one of the other commandments. You're really taking ownership of the outcome, right? When you take initiative, you are taking responsibility of things that happen around you, and then eventually the title shows up. Yeah, that's the thing that I've learned is like, some people get hired for the title. Yeah. And then some people earn a title when they take initiative.
What's funny is the longer I chased the title, I never would get the title.
Yeah.
But then when you stop chasing the title, it just kind of pops up.
You know, it's interesting though, Mike. I mean, that you say that, like, you didn't ask me for the role. We just announced that we've done a nationwide partnership with Adam Hergenrother and the Hergenrother Realty Group, and I coached with Adam for 3 years. Never one single time did I ever ask for a role, a title, any involvement in the company at all. And
it makes sense.
And that the opportunity showed up for a need, and because I had taken initiative and demonstrated that without any compensation or without any involvement in the day-to-day company, there was the initiative to take responsibility for growing the production of the company. And so day one, jump in and take initiative. You said, this is what I got hired for. How do we solve a problem, and how do we drive agent productivity? So let's go. I mean, I know better than to wait around to be told what to do.
Right.
It would be a real short-lived opportunity for me if I waited on Adam to tell me what to do.
Yeah, and it was the same thing when I started, at Indy Metro West. If I waited to get trained, and that's the thing. That's like, people wait. Like, people like, well, I don't know how to do a listing contract. Well, I don't know how to do it. Well, you know what? Figure it out. Like, you know what? Yeah. And so when I got hired as a CEO, and they were like, okay, you know what? I read a lot of books, and you just got to take action.
One of the best things that I've heard at Gary Keller's mastermind, I'm sure that's supposed to be private, so I'm going to ask for forgiveness later. But it was such a like punch in the face to me that it was so good. There was someone who stood up who I believe runs the farm and land and ranch division of the company, and the guy stood up at a mastermind one time because Linda McKissick asked the question that said, Gary, when do I know when I'm being too demanding of an outcome, and when am I expecting too much, and then when am I like being reasonable? When am I being reasonable, or when am I being unreasonable? And Gary said, I actually don't know what you're talking about. Those two words are not words that are in my lexicon. I don't know the concept of reasonable or unreasonable. Yeah. I know probable and possible.
Right.
And if someone else has done it, I know it's possible. Whether or not that person can do it is probability, and I'm not focused on probability. I'm focused on possibility. And I was like, well, that was not the answer I was expecting to hear. Right? I really wanted him to answer the question and solve the problem, because I have the same problem. I'm sure everyone else does. How do I know when I'm being unreasonable or not? And so someone stood up in the farm and land division and said, Gary, I'll never forget. The first week that I partnered with you, I said, I brought an idea to you that we should implement, and told you all about what it was, and you said, that's a great idea. And then he goes, and I asked you back, well, so what do we do next then? Like, what do we have to do to put it together? And Gary goes, if you have to ask that question, you're the wrong person.
Yeah.
And he goes, you turned around and you walked away from me. And in 7 years, you've never answered a single question for me.
Yeah.
And
that's
my
totally
mind blew.
it. That is it. Like, people come to you with problems.
Yeah.
But nobody, like, you're looking for the people. Not only do you have the problems, but what is the solution? Mm-hmm. And so that's adding value. Like, as soon as you figure that out, like, anybody can say, this is wrong, but how do we fix it? And that's what you need as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Someone who takes initiative of that in order to drive the value.
And owns it.
Yeah. I thought it was cool. The guy said he'd been there for 7 years and Gary's never answered another question for him like that or solved one of his problems. So it's someone who's taking the initiative to generate that value.
It really does have a lot to play into what you were saying, Eric. It's you've got highlighted in your book here for those of you that are listening or watching. I'm holding Eric's book, so it's always interesting to see what somebody highlights in a book. But he's got proactive versus reactive highlighted. So being proactive means stepping out, taking a risk, and trying something, which is a true entrepreneurial skill and capability. But then being reactive means you're being passive and waiting for others to go first. And so it is asking for forgiveness and not permission. And so then it's just taking those initial steps that I think is the difference maker to somebody that actually bring value to a company or somebody that is just kind of waiting around to be told what to do, which is vital, I feel like, in any kind of company's growth. A couple of there's 4 take action steps here outlined in this section of the book. One is ask yourself, how could this situation be improved? What could I do to make it better? Number 2 is start by taking small risks that have few negative consequences to acclimate yourself to taking risks. So generally get used to it. And then you'll probably even see like, my boss isn't reacting negatively when I actually try to fix something. So I imagine you guys, when you guys have somebody that just is attempting to be Eric. Proactive.
I do it to Eric. I just, run fast, break shit.
Yeah.
I do feel like it's probably appreciated too. Yeah, because it's like, okay, there is an attempt here. Yeah.
I won't do that again. Or, hey, it worked.
Well, I mean, and largely, I can tell you one thing for sure that I experience is that when someone doesn't take initiative, is that it leaves me as the chief decision-making officer, and the more decisions that you make in a day, the fewer decisions that you're able to make well.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of days that I'll procrastinate a decision because there are too many decisions, or I don't have the right answer and don't have the white space to make that right answer. So when people just take the ball and run with it, it eliminates the need for extra bottlenecking decisions to be made.
Yeah. It just kind of leads into number 3, recognize that asking for permission is a habit, and so is asking for forgiveness. So just like making it a habit to just take action and then see what happens versus sitting by paralysis by analysis and just waiting for something to happen, or, well, let's see what happens first, then I'll maybe say something. So I think it's also important to have like an environment and culture within your organization that fosters that kind of feedback.
That you can do it.
Yeah, because otherwise, what can lead to this take action step 4, which is be sensitive to how your suggestions come across so that people you want to help make things better and you're not just being critical.
Yeah. That's one of the things that's actually one of the like delicate dances that I'm going through myself, is knowing that I'm early in the leadership phase with the company and with the leadership team. I want to jump in and just take initiative or take responsibility for a vertical. The reality is that I also realize that the new guy who wants to point out problems and suggest things is also really freaking annoying. And so there is a balance of trying to understand what is the accepted dynamic of a team of leaders, in which, okay, what can you not touch in a company?
Yeah.
And what can you touch and run with and make better? Where's that balance? I think that's where you have to observe people.
Yeah.
And you have to build trust.
Yeah.
In order to take initiative and ask for forgiveness without being the annoying person.
Yeah, and how do you show up to other people?
Yeah.
So you have to be super mindful of how you show up to people. So then you can. How
would you do that?
Oh man.
It's a great. So hearing you say that was a great framing perspective for me.
Yeah.
I guess
I struggle with it.
Yeah.
I really do. I struggle with it because you have to, the way people see you, and you have to like, the biggest way I do it is results.
Okay.
When I open my mouth, what I say, and then it's actions, receipts. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, what came to mind listening to you was when you show up to serve, the organization and the person that you're working with is the quickest way probably to build that level of trust. And so what I've been doing as an effort to ensure that there's an understanding of intent is, what can I take off your plate?
Right.
What are you doing that is
You're
bogging
adding
down
value.
your job in order for me to own that, so that it's, if I appear to be critical,
right,
then I want to be critical of the things that you don't want to do anymore and are bogging down your 20%.
So not only are you being critical, you're giving a solution, so that you can like be a part of the solution.
Yeah, because in my opinion, leaders and people who have a high set of standards for themselves want to contribute.
Absolutely, yeah. So you don't want to just do it to dump on them. You want to do it to help them.
That's right.
And so a couple of things that another thing that you said earlier, about adding energy to someone. The one fallacy as an entrepreneur that I have learned, and it's kind of it burned me out, is that you can't really add energy to anyone. It may be temporary, but like if your focus is on bringing on people that the batteries are included, because if you are putting your energy, you just don't have enough energy to run a business.
How do you identify that in an interview for any of you? Like if you're meeting with somebody, how do you think that you uncover that part? Like whether someone has batteries included or not?
I did hear on a podcast I was editing this week about a tactic that this person uses when they're hiring someone. They give them a task that's really, really difficult. And in this case, it was like finding a bakery, like a good cake, for like but only pay $12 for it, because she knew that was a really hard thing to do. And so she was actually doing it to see like how people solved it. Like organized people would send like a spreadsheet, and it'd be like, this bakery's this far away, and I was able to get them down to this if you buy this many. And like, but then like a creative person might run into it and be like, I don't think we're going to be able to find it for that price. So they may even come up with like, you could get cupcakes for this, or you could get this for this.
Interesting.
So she uses that when she's interviewing people to figure out literally, do you have enough batteries included to go solve a difficult problem?
Yeah.
And then also sees then how they use their energy to solve the problem.
Yeah. We do something similar from an operations side with same thing, which is like a travel experiment, basically. If, fictitious scenario is I come in and drop this problem that I'm traveling to go to a conference on this date. Walk me through all the steps that you're going through in order to ensure that this is all taken care of and booked, and then demonstrate what the end product looks like.
Yeah.
And my intent is to try to understand is, are you reserving an expensive hotel? Are you booking a Motel 6? Mm-hmm. Are we getting a direct flight? Are we getting multiple stops? Am I speaking at the conference, or am I attending the conference? So am I going in the morning? Am I going the day before? Am I like, what are the logistics? There's not a right or a wrong answer.
Right.
But here's the thing, I'm not available. So you have to you got to have the outcome.
Yeah.
And I'm not, and I'm not available to answer your questions. So, but you got to have it booked.
And you want to see the process. You want to
That's
see how they come to the conclusion, or whether they're going to. I remember I used to early on. I don't do this anymore, but I used to, during my interview, I would send them a KPA, and once I send them a KPA, I would do an interview on the phone. Once I do an interview on the phone, I would meet them, and I would literally sit them in front of my computer, and I'd say, make phone calls until I tell you to stop.
Yeah.
I did. I would just say, hey, just bang out phone calls till I tell you to stop. Here's the script. Here's what we're doing. This is what you're doing. And people would do it. Some people, I ain't doing that. You know whether or not you're going to be good on my team or not. That was the quickest way. Or they'll do it for 15 minutes and I will go in there and the dude is gone.
One last thing for batteries, I think, is how you test for this. When we go through the career visioning process at Keller Williams, you go through the life story portion of the conversation with that candidate. During that life story, what I'm looking for is what are ways that a person has historically demonstrated a habit and a pattern of having an extracurricular success and or success in whatever they set out to achieve. So are they doing things without provocation, like working while in college? Are they on, quiz bowl and sports and extracurriculars while going to college? Are they doing things that require more of themselves than just status
Showing
quo?
up. Yeah. Another thing I look for victims.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So like, why did you leave? And if they blame everything on everybody else, then it is what it is. You can kind of pick that up really quick. Yeah. And so like, if you have that for some reason, there's a disconnect. They just don't, I can't partner with them very well.
Well, that's a good segue to number 4, Tyler, if you have that one by chance in front of you, or Kate, because, that for me is the fastest way to lose with me. Is the same thing, is the storytelling and victims.
So number 4 is have an ownership attitude. Take full responsibility for your projects, your communication, and your actions.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big one. And a lot of the thing is, you don't see it. And the thing is, I'll have a victim mentality on something I don't even realize I have. Yeah, I remember I did hiring people. I'm like, well, I'm just not. I'm not going out doing what I need to do in order to get good at it. Yeah. So, yeah, that's totally a big one.
It is. It's one of the flaws that we have, is that we're conditioned almost because of consequences in telling the truth at times. Right, is when we don't have the safe space to admit that we didn't do what we said we would do, either because we were overcommitted, we're underskilled or underknowledged, or we're afraid of the consequences. Oftentimes, when we make excuses or don't take responsibility for the actions and for the outcome, it's something it's baggage we've carried with us since we were little children, I think. Yeah. And so how I try to catch myself and others is, I think the word excuse is 2 weeks ago we talked about words. Mm-hmm. And the word excuse has a negative connotation to it, where people think that excuses are pretty cut and dry. They're clear. Like, most of the time when you're making an excuse for something, it's like blatantly obvious.
Right.
But when we tell stories, that's when we're telling the story to ourselves to listen to our own bullshit. Yeah. And so for me, the fastest way to lose with me is to tell stories, because I just have to assume that if you're telling a long story about something with a really short answer, that it just didn't happen. And like, why it didn't happen, I don't care. I actually care more about the fact that you told yourself a story than you did about it not actually doing it, because having it not be done won't fix it.
Right. Which goes back to one of our other things, is having being results driven. Yeah. The story doesn't matter. What the outcome of that story is what matters.
That's right. And sometimes, here's the thing: is I don't do everything I say I'm going to do. Yeah. And the faster I can accept, right? The faster we can accept that we're all infallible, working towards upholding more of the commitments that we make every day, is the faster we can get comfortable with telling no stories about why we committed to something that either we were unable or unwilling to deliver on. I mean, the end of the day, it doesn't change the outcome as long as if we tell a story. Sometimes it makes it more understandable.
Yeah.
Like I was going to do something last weekend. Lauren's plane caught on fire.
Yeah.
It was not on my calendar to have her mid-flight plane have a cabin fire.
It's a great story.
Right? But it derailed my ability to get done what I had committed to getting done at that time.
Right.
So no excuses. Should have gotten it done. Life showed up.
Yeah.
I was going to add to responsibility equals blame is is like the first section in this, but I think what you've got highlighted here I thought was interesting, and I think it's like a really important differentiator between people that kind of get this or not. But while it's admitting when you've made a mistake and setting it right, it also means taking credit for something you've done well. It means owning something and making it yours, both the good and the bad.
Do you do that?
I think
do any of you guys actually take credit when you do things well?
that's what I was going to say. I'm really good at taking blame, or
I take blame, and
like
I don't
owning
take
the bad.
credit when, I try to deflect, hey,
I am one of the world's greatest at taking blame.
Yeah, I'll take the blame all day, but I never want to take credit, which I think it's like, well, why? And I think it is
interesting, right? Because that makes me wonder, like, is it less fulfilling to take credit for yourself? Like, do we actually just all want someone else to acknowledge it and give us credit for it?
Yeah, I think that takes the fun
that
out of it.
next level?
When I'm saying, hey, look at me.
Yeah, because you definitely wanted me to acknowledge the other day your spreadsheet that you built, right?
I was upset.
Yeah, and so I'll tell you what, though, I learned in that moment, though, the difference that I was oblivious to, which is that exact thing, which is giving credit when someone worked hard on something that they want credit for in an organization. And like I did it when Lauren's plane caught fire. She called and I said, here's how I went right into like problem solving mode. That was, okay, then here's the problem. Here's the solution. How would you like me to solve it? Here are some choices. This is what I'm going to do if you don't pick an outcome.
Yeah.
She didn't want me to do that actually at that time.
Actually,
she wanted me to just actually like be present and empathetic and acknowledge the feeling that was needed in that moment. The same way that you did with that spreadsheet, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. I do the same thing. I just wonder if as leaders, if that's actually something that we all need to improve on.
Yeah. My therapist just taught me that this week. about the whole, because I'm captain, save them. So, So instead of like throwing out like, this is how I'm gonna fix this, just saying, hey, do you need help with that? You know, just start there. So I'm pretty horrible at that.
I think it has something to do too with being able to trust the people that are working with you. They talk about trust in this section. And part of taking greater responsibility and ownership is building trust with your team and your entrepreneur. And the thing with trust is when it's given, you work really hard to be worthy of it. And I thought that was kind of something that stood out for me as well in this, because it is something where it's like if somebody's trusting you to take on a task or just trusting your judgment on something, you do want to your actions, you want to like have them reflect what you're trying to like take care of. And then you can encourage the entrepreneur to trust you by not making assumptions. Instead, ask, what do I need to know in order for this project to be a success?
And that's the thing too, is that like, somebody has to ask questions. We talked about it last week, Tyler, is that communication is a two-way street. There is the sender and the receiver.
Right.
And it is not exclusively the sender's responsibility to ensure that communication has actually occurred. The receiver has a responsibility to provide feedback, to ask questions, to gain the clarity that's needed in order to accomplish what responsibility they've been given. And so what I hear is that's a fantastic question, is what does this look like when it's done and done well? Because sometimes the person who's communicating doesn't actually know.
Yeah.
especially if they're an entrepreneur.
I just did it with you earlier when we were prepping, and I said a generic term, and there's a disconnect. We talked about this. Your face stops a clock, or your beauty transcends time, right? We're saying the same exact thing, but I'm using different words. You do an excellent job, Eric, saying what I heard you say is this. So I can say something, and then you share with me what you heard. Yeah. So then there's no breakdown in the communication. Normally that doesn't happen. I say what I say, and then you hear it, and I may have said your face stops a clock.
Well, I'm terrible at as being the sender, or at least oftentimes I think that I am. And that's certainly feedback that I get, is that being the sender is not one of my strengths. I see a end result in an abstract, ambiguous outcome. I don't see all the steps to get there. Someone like Kate sees the steps to get there. Someone like Kate, if she's a receiver, may have to extract those steps or extract clarity to the end result. But it's not exclusively a one-way street for the sender to be solely responsible for doing that.
Yeah.
I think there's like a couple of things to that. I think when you are working with any like big thinking entrepreneur, I know, Eric, like when we are driving or when we're just on one of our phone calls, we do have a lot of times where it's like we're kind of like imagining a big picture of like what could be something. And so I think it is important to try to break that down, because a lot of times I know for myself, I think out loud. Yeah. And so especially on our phone calls, I think sometimes it's just more of a thought experiment phone call more than anything, where then it's like, okay, but then it leads to something, and then we're able to kind of, something will come from it. And also going back to asking back, or asking kind of, mirroring is the term that I learned in therapy. It works really well for relationships, because you want to be able to mirror what your partner is saying. Otherwise you might just assume how they feel about something, or just because you would feel some way about that. When in reality it might be something different.
My experience has been that not everyone's able to do that well, though. So what is the effective tools or keys to being able to mirror effectively, you think? And maybe Kate's the better one for that.
Well, a lot of what Michael said you did well. That's why Tyler and I were both looking at each other, because we were like mirroring. Like the way you literally learn it typically in therapy is especially if you're in couples therapy is your therapist will like,
which we're notice, like clearly all a big fan right. of that. But I say it everywhere we go, right? Tyler's like, I am therapy advocate number one. It's had a massive impact on my own life in a very positive way. And most people would have said that I had everything going for me and didn't need therapy. And you could make that argument, but man, I'm a hell of a lot better person 10 years of therapy than without. So go get therapy. Yes, I agree. When you're learning how to do it, if you have a good therapist, they've probably been paying attention and they can think of a topic that you aren't like gelling on yet. And so then basically one person gets to start, and you use like I statements when you're talking about yourself, like I feel this, I think this, or whatever the issue is. And so you wait for the person to be done talking, and then you literally say back to them, what I'm hearing is, and you said that's even kind of what Eric has done with you. And so then you say back what you're hearing. And what's interesting is you may use different words than the other person, but it uncovers like how you interpreted what they said. Yeah. And that's how you can get down. And then, so sometimes like I would say, what I'm hearing you say is this, and he'd be like, no. Mm-hmm. And so like, if you don't do that, you never know that you're having miscommunications. And you go and that's where the break is. Yeah. Yeah. And that happens in our marriages. And that's also what happens when we're working with our partners in our business and with our clients. Yeah. And when someone feels heard, mm-hmm. it's the most powerful thing you can give someone. And when they feel understood, telling on myself here, went to Kroger the other day to pick up a prescription, and it wasn't at the Kroger that I went to. Thought that it was told that it was not. I was like, I just wanted the problem solved, to try to understand, how do I solve this problem? Where is it? How do I pick it up? How do I get it? we weren't communicating, the person at the pharmacist and the pharmacist was growing increasingly frustrated, and then I was growing increasingly more frustrated. She said, well, you're going to have to leave if you continue to continue to act frustrated like this, or act like if you continue to act hostile. And I was like, I'm not acting that way. I'm frustrated because I just want to know, how do we simply solve the problem? When that person didn't hear my feeling, my emotion in that conversation, it actually elevated my level of frustration.
Right.
And so it's like, hey, how do we go awry here?
Yeah.
It's because people stop listening, or they listen with their own filter.
Right.
To the way someone feels. I think it's an incredibly challenging skill set that takes a ton of work for people to understand.
Yeah.
You have to actually understand feelings. But I know that sounds ridiculous to say you have to understand feelings, but I didn't know feelings 10 years ago when I showed up. No clue.
Yeah.
No.
I remember being asked, when was the last time you were sad? And I was like, I wore that thing with a badge, man. I'm like, I got a crown. I'm the champion of the world. I was maybe like
I'm
6,
a badass.
5. I don't know. I haven't been sad in at least 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't know that actually was something men knew how to do.
Yeah. You suppress it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so if you suppress it, you don't actually know how to identify it and listen to it.
So I work with I work with some kids in Anderson, and they need some guidance, some mentor. And we asked the guy, one of the young men, we asked him, what it was like to be a man. He's a young man. He's coming up probably he's a teenager, 12, 13. He says, I don't want to be scared. Real men aren't scared. And I'm like, bro, I'm scared every day.
Yeah, that's right.
It's just like, how do you handle that?
That's right.
So if we grow up with that conditioning our children that you're not supposed to have fear, and then they experience it, that messes you up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think we're teaching our kids the wrong message. Yes, as a man, we can have emotions, we can cry, we can have fear. It's how you handle it.
That's right.
To wrap up this section, on taking ownership and having an ownership attitude, there's 4 questions that the book outlines that I really like that kind of help clarify what results you're going after. One is, what do I need to know in order for this project to be a success? I think that's where it's like, you can definitely, one person might think, oh, this is the result we're going for, but actually it might be something completely different. What's the worst case scenario? What are you worried about, so I can take steps to make sure that doesn't happen? What's the best case scenario? What do I need to be working towards? And what's your criteria for success? What standards do I have to make sure I hit for you to have confidence? I think each of those questions are really good, because it is,
they are. Tattoo that.
Yeah, it's very tattoo worthy.
Yeah.
That's because what I think all those questions do a good job of is forecasting what could happen, and it also helps tackle any assumptions that could be relevant in the conversation as well.
It also requires both parties to know what success looks like and to get clarity on it. Otherwise, what happens is you chase frisbees, right? And that's one of the things about being an entrepreneur is you throw out ideas because you see opportunity in everything.
Yeah.
And so when you throw frisbees to the frisbee catching dog, they may try to catch all 9 of them simultaneously, but 9 frisbees may not be what's required to win. Maybe you only need to get 5 of them in order to win the frisbee catching dog contest.
Yeah. Maybe it's the red one, and you throw out 9
right.
and only one of them's red. So you're out chasing all 9. You need to go get that red one.
So everyone needs to be in alignment to understand that, and it's not exclusively the sender and the leader's responsibility for that, for sure.